Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so we tried for about 10 solid minutes and we're having trouble live streaming to Facebook, so I thought I would just get the party started, the conversation started rather, and we're so thankful for your time, Councilmember Barbara Bry. I know you're busy, you're a leader here, you're the council member of my district. I live in District 1 and I also own a business that is currently shut down in District 1. So thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. And I will go ahead and let Alexis just take it away.
Great.
Thank you for being with us today. I know your schedule is rather busy, so thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Alexis.
Yeah, you're welcome. So just to get started, what would be, as mayor, what would be your top 3 priorities to jumpstart the economy in respect to small businesses, restaurants, and just the San Diego economy? What would be your top 3 priorities?
So I'm very pleased that the federal government stepped up and passed a very big stimulus program, but it appears they've run out of money and we need to inject more money into our small businesses. And I'm hopeful that Congress will do that. The federal government has a lot more money than we have in the city of San Diego, and federal stimulus is essential in keeping our small businesses operating. I'm hoping that the Bella Vista Social Club and Cafe, I wish to get it back, if I get it backwards, Amanda, I'm hoping that you will be back operating soon and that you will be able to take advantage of some of this federal assistance. The city has started 2 funds to help small business. One was $6 million, which is pretty much gone, and a second one that we launched earlier this week to particularly help small home-based businesses. And they are people who often just don't qualify for SBA loans. And we need to open up the economy in a responsible way. And earlier, I actually did watch a presidential press conference at which Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx actually went through, I think, a very well thought out way that we'll be able to open up things gradually. So they're looking at declines in the rate of new cases over a 14-day period. And I believe with the data I've seen from the county, we are flattening the curve. So San Diego, because of the stringent measures we took to shelter in place, to do our social distancing, to wear masks when we go out in public, we will ease back into a more normal environment more quickly than many other places.
Barbara, how have local biotechs and universities, which are often in your district, how have they contributed and what can they do to stop COVID?
So first of all, I'm very proud that San Diego has a very collaborative technology and biotech ecosystem. And very quickly, Biocom, which is the trade group for the life science industry, started a website where companies and hospitals could share what excess supplies they had and what their needs were. So if a company had excess number of face masks, it could let others know. I think this is extraordinary. Second, many San Diego companies are making test kits, Hologic and Thermo Fisher to name 2. Other companies like Inovio are developing therapeutic products. And ResMed is making ventilators. Research is going on at probably every major research organization in town, looking at potential treatments. My council office did a webinar a little over 2 weeks ago where we featured Dr. Eric Allman Sapphire at the La Jolla Institute of Immunology, who is leading an effort that's funded by the Gates Foundation to figure out treatments. And this is very exciting. This is happening in San Diego. And I think many people aren't aware of all that's happening in our region, not just our city, but our region to combat this terrible virus.
It's amazing that California and San Diego especially, and also San Francisco, have stepped up to do this. I mean, when President Trump throws it to the governors, at least in California, you have a high science science business. I was amazed that Elon Musk, right, just made a couple calls and brought over 1 million masks on a jet airplane. I mean, that kind of symbolizes how we do things. And that was before they had anything back east.
Yeah, and I think what's great in California is we have a lot of public-private partnerships. That's what has been an essential part of the success of the tech and biotech industries in San Diego. And this was evident during this terrible health emergency.
Speaking of collaborations about the biotech, what has Corona revealed about the relationship between the city and county?
I think one of the good things that's come out of this is the city and the county are really working well together. During the Hep A crisis a few years ago, we did not see that. There has been a really great amount of cooperation this time around, and I'm optimistic that this will continue as we need to address regional issues like homelessness.
Could you speak to homelessness? Because there's a divide between La Jolla and other parts of the city, but it seems like San Diego is stepping up a bit. The food bank here is almost national in scope, for instance. And how are people being served in underserved places? And what would you do to make that better, I guess?
Yeah, so we have two good food banks in San Diego, Feeding San Diego and the Jacobs Cushman Food Bank. I think what's important with the homeless, we realize that these people are very vulnerable, and the convention center has been opened up. First, the individuals and families who were living in the bridge shelters were moved to the convention center so that they could be more socially distanced because it's such a giant space. And now other homeless individuals are moving in so that we're getting more people off the street. And I think it was just announced a little while ago, something though that I'd been thinking about for a while is this is a good time to be buying hotels as a long-term solution for providing more housing for homeless people. The hotel industry is having a terrible time. Basically, the city collected zero TOT money, that's hotel visitor tax money, in April. And so to buy hotels and motels on a long-term lease purchase basis and turn this into housing is a very good thing to be doing at this moment in time. It's much less expensive than building new units. And this is going to start to happen.
Well, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just kind of want to, and I got strong arms. Don't worry, guys. Anything to bring you the news. Going back to the plan about the economy opening up again, what does that look like? You said you had just watched a piece and they were speaking about how we would do that. Is it really contingent upon testing, or could you lay that out?
It is contingent upon testing. Okay. And I talked with two local companies in the last week, both of which make test equipment. One, they are literally exponentially increasing the amount of test kits they are making today versus what they'll be making in 3 weeks. It's extraordinary. I mean, it's a wonderful example of the private sector figuring out how to do something very quickly. And of course, many of these tests will be available to, all over the world. But since these companies are based here, I'm hopeful that a lot of them will be here. So it's having the test, and then we need the personal protective equipment for the healthcare professionals who are going to administer the test. We need the laboratory capability, and apparently the lab capability we have. And I'm, hopeful that the protective equipment that the governor is buying will soon reach our health professionals here, and that we'll be able to expand the testing really quickly.
Okay.
Wonderful. The next mayor is going to inherit a radically different San Diego. I mean, the San Diego we knew some years ago, and so even last week, 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, is going to be radically different. How does that inform your leadership? When you get in, what have you learned, and what is it going to require in terms of leadership for this mayor to come in and have a city with the same name, but radically different needs and a different engagement in the economy, socially, and otherwise?
So I step back and I look at San Diego broadly. I look at our economy broadly. The voters just defeated Measure C, which would have increased our hotel tax and allowed bonds to be issued to expand our convention center. Perhaps that doesn't seem like such a good idea at this time. And as we know, the tourism industry creates low-wage jobs. Tech and biotech create high-wage jobs. I certainly want tourism to continue to be an important part of the San Diego economy. But as mayor, I will focus on increasing the importance of tech and biotech, which create high-paying jobs and good service sector jobs around them. And as mayor, I will focus on making sure that the children who are growing up south of Interstate 8, who traditionally have not had access to these jobs, have those opportunities. I've talked about having a school engagement and coordinator in my office who will work with employers so that they are engaged with schools so that children from a young age understand the opportunities that are available to them. And as they get older, they will have paid internships available. And I think, especially when we've seen what our biotech industry is doing for the world in terms of COVID-19, what our biotech industry can do going forward in many ways, as well as our high-tech industries, this is where my focus will be as mayor.
Barbara, talk about
I think that's a good shout out to the STEAM leadership and to Cindy Martin and
Yes.
Cheryl Hiblin and Mike Goodbody and all the San Diego Unified has really stepped up to try to do that from K to 12, with your help and others.
Yes.
But it's very innovative. Alexis, sorry about that.
No, that's okay, Steve. As Barbara, as you were saying that, I'm thinking about the revitalization of Portland Plaza as a tech hub. One of the criticisms of downtown is that a lot of the men and women who work in the hotel industry and the restaurant industry can't afford to live downtown. Talk about bringing the tech industry into downtown and creating jobs in the downtown area and making downtown a more economically viable piece of real estate for young men and young women who may want to buy a home down.
You've said something very important. And right now we know that a very small percentage of the people who live downtown, work downtown. And one of the things I've talked about is the importance of creating a larger employment base downtown with good jobs. We already have fairly good transit coming into downtown, particularly from the south and from the east. The Mid-Coast Trolley will be finished in the fall of 2021. That will connect downtown to UCSD. You'll actually be able to go from the border all the way up to UCSD very easily. At the same time, a lot of apartments are being built downtown, and many of these are affordable units. To their credit, a lot of the development downtown, the developers are doing on-site affordable. In particularly Holland Partners, which is doing a massive project on Broadway where the old old courthouse is. 20% of the units there will be affordable, which means they will be restricted to, I think, families earning up to 60% of median income. And we're seeing this all over downtown. So this will actually, this housing will not be for the tech and biotech workers. This will be for individuals who work in the hotel industry and restaurants and other service industries.
It's a great discussion, a great silo, because we can learn from San Francisco as we expand into that even more than we already have.
Yeah, and they did it the wrong way, actually. The disparity in San Francisco is not the way to go.
What is the way to go? If we were to implement any measure of that downtown, what have we learned from San Francisco? That's to our city.
So one of the key things is I want whatever we do in this community to benefit the people who already live in this community. And I think that's very important. So I'm thinking a lot about the children who are growing up today and making sure they have access to the good jobs. And at the same time, making sure we have housing for families of all income levels.
And also, you've been the hot button issue of Airbnb. How does that play into COVID at the moment?
So I've been reading a lot of articles. Anecdotally, Airbnb is struggling. And anecdotally, we hear that many of these short-term rentals are coming back into the market as long-term rentals. And I think that's a really good thing.
Huh.
When we talk about San Diego, we almost have to talk about the border. I don't think we can talk about San Diego without talking about our sister city across the border. Can you speak to that in the coronavirus era and then a post-coronavirus? How is this relationship going to unfold, given that we are inextricably bound to each other?
Yeah. So we are a binational region, and that's actually one of our strengths. And we have people live and work on both sides of the border. They, in a different pre-corona and post-corona, people, enjoy restaurants on both sides of the border. Tijuana has a wonderful art scene. And this is a very important part of who we are, and it needs to continue. In a business sense, a lot of medical devices and equipment that we use in the United States is manufactured in Tijuana. And that is continuing right now because these are critical industries. It's important to know that the San Diego biotech industry is basically at work every day, whether or not they're making a product directly related to COVID. Dexcom is making a glucose monitor that is critical for, everyone who has diabetes. So these industries are continuing to work, continuing to employ people because they are critical.
Go ahead, sorry.
Just a quick aside. I just want to let you know, as I'm sitting here holding this, I get to read all of the comments that are coming in, and people are just so excited. I think you're a breath of fresh air right now, Barbara. They're like, oh, she's so articulate. She's so smart, so well-spoken. So I just wanted to throw that in the mix for one. I think people really enjoy.
So I think what's most important is I'm optimistic. This is a very resilient entrepreneurial community. It is part of our DNA across the board, whether it's the arts world or the biotech world or the real estate world. This is an entrepreneurial, resilient community, and we are going to thrive in the long run, and we are going to defeat this coronavirus.
One of the things that's been said, and well, first of all, I have to tell you a quick little story. I've got a friend who lives downtown on Cortez Hill. And I said, how's it going? She goes, well, something very interesting has happened. The police cars come with their sirens on, and they come up 9th Avenue, and they stop, and the sirens are going, and everybody's wondering what's going on. And the cops are blaring the most amazing, uplifting songs. They get cars, they're telling all the residents, we love you.
Oh.
We're so happy that you're following all the rules and the stay in place kind of thing. And we love you very much. And people are applauding the police officers. And so I think it's so interesting when we talk about San Diego finest city, that at this moment in time, a virus has become a portal for us to collaborate and for us to really kind of deconstruct the borders and the boundaries of differences. How as mayor can you sustain this kind of cohesion, this kind of ecosystem of, I want to say equity, because one of the things we say is that we're all in this together.
Yes.
And my thing is we're all in this together as a virus. Post-corona, how are we all in this together in an equitable way in terms of economy, in terms of access to healthcare, in terms of my homeless brothers and sisters? And this is a big, big question. But how does this not become an ephemeral kind of coexistence? How does the mayor lead the city to maintain this cohesion?
Yeah, you've asked a very important question. And I think it's about, first of all, I chair the budget committee, and we're going to be starting budget hearings on April 30th. I think how the city spends its money is an indication of its values and how we invest in our communities. And over the years, many communities have not gotten their fair share of investment in parks, in libraries, in streets, in sidewalks. And we need to make up the deficit that has existed over the years. And I think it's important where the mayor shows up and who the mayor talks to and who the mayor has on their staff. I mean, I'm committed to a diverse team that will represent the best of San Diego and bringing in people to City Hall whose voices have not traditionally been at the table.
So give me one or two offices you'll have in your office that's not currently in your office to speak to that.
I think the school engagement coordinator is the big one, because deepening employer engagement with our schools, starting with elementary school, I think is going to be key in making sure that all of our young people have access to the jobs of the future. That's really one of the major things. And then it's really who I put in the positions and how they're going to think about the city.
Yeah. Well, I used to live downtown, so I have a lot of the questions. How are you going to listen? Because there's so many voices that will come to you, and the expectation of you is going to be enormous, more than any one mayor or any one mayor can do. How do you listen? How do you prioritize? How do you speak to, again, San Diego as the finest city in America? How do you lead that way? How do you listen deeply and then take action to ensure that people feel heard?
So what I've done my whole life before I had a career as an elected official, so I had 30 years as a journalist and as a businesswoman in the tech world, and I've had almost 4 years as an elected official. In the business world, you listen to your customer. And when you're the mayor or an elected official, your customer is the residents of your community. And you listen partly through your staff, but you try to get out into public as much as possible in informal ways where people can come up and talk to you. And for me, it's just not so much right now, but doing my errands on the weekends, going to the dry cleaners, the grocery store, CVS, walking, in my district, just going to the beach, going to a park, and just striking up conversations with whoever is there. And I plan to do that all over the city as mayor. So one day I may be in Rolando, another day I may be in Encanto. You're not going to know where I'm going to be doing my grocery shopping and my errands and who I'm going to be talking to. And of course, a lot of it is, who I have on my staff. And one of the things I want to do with each council member, and there will be 5 new council members in our next administration, is I want to go out to each of their communities with them in a format that works for them to hear directly from their residents about what's important. And I'll be much more visible than I think most of our elected officials have been. I think until 4 or 5 weeks ago, I think my council district felt that I was very visible. Right now, I'm visible online and on the phone and on Zoom meetings all day.
Barbara?
Mayor Garcetti of LA kind of forlornly talked about the perhaps loss of major sports franchises. I mean, LA lives by it. That's how they identify. But you've been front and center on our own sports coliseums. What do you think it's going to look like? And does that change such a hot button issue that the Coliseum and San Diego State was over the last 3 years?
Well, I think it's very important to close the transaction with San Diego State. The voters passed a ballot measure. It's taken the city too long to complete the transaction. I've been very, very frustrated. And actually now it's become a financial imperative to close the transaction because it's money into the general fund, plus we eliminate a liability. So I think, and of course they're going to build a stadium on this land in Mission Valley, which is an economic stimulus to the whole community. And the board of trustees of the CSU system has approved investing, I think it's around $350 million in infrastructure improvements and the river park over a period of years. So I think this is very important. How sporting events are going to look, when we'll be able to go to them, I don't have those answers. As we've talked about earlier, widespread testing is going to be important. In other countries, they're able to do temperature screening as you go into the grocery store. So there are many things that may come into place. I know I've even been reading about that we may have sporting events without a live audience. So it may just be, the baseball players will be on the field and they will have all been temperature tested and screened before they get to play with each other, but we'll just be watching on TV for a while.
Hot tempers on the field.
Yeah.
And also it might be like the Oakland Raiders. You know how the fans always wore bandanas,
That's right.
bandanas anyway?
Yeah.
They were ahead of their time.
A question for myself. I was on the phone before this segment just talking and brainstorming, how do I own a social club when there's social distancing? And a lot of, whether it's sports or restaurants or bars, how are people going to reopen their businesses? And will we have to stay 6 feet apart? What that's going to look like? Barbara, going back to the question about how you're going to lead, and I understand being a businesswoman is so important because entrepreneurs know how to pivot. They know how to be agile. They know how to respond quickly. I'm curious what your thoughts were about how our city has responded, but I also wanted to bring up an important point, which is listening. Your listening skills is because you were a mom, right? And I think that's important. I think women, as I've stepped into the role of leadership and worked with other women, I think women lead differently. Mm-hmm. And I think women by nature we form our tribes and we're collaborative. So I didn't want to leave that piece of the puzzle out.
Yeah, and I think what's also important is I was a journalist early in my career. For 8 years, I worked for the Sacramento Bee and the LA Times. And I've often said as a journalist, I learned to do my research, I learned to ask questions, I learned to listen, and then I was relentless in getting the story. And I sometimes feel that I think was very effective training to be a good elected official. And I'm also a grandma, Amanda, so someday you will be too. And I think my and you've said it, my entrepreneurial background, I mean, I've had to deal with constant change in my life. And I'm used to having to figure out a new way of doing things. That's just sort of been what I've had to do for the last 30 years. And I think the city has to figure out new ways of doing things, new ways of delivering services, a new way of thinking. Do we need 101 Ash Street, this albatross that's been costing $5 million a month? I think no. We found out that many city workers can work effectively remotely. We need some physical places, of course, but do we need as many as we had? Down the road, will we be turning parking garages into housing? So I think everybody needs internet access. The San Diego Unified has done a great job of distributing 40,000 Chromebooks and getting internet access to kids who didn't have it, who now are going to have to do distance learning until we can get back to a physical setting. But everybody needs it. Elderly people need it for telemedicine and to do grocery shopping. And this, as mayor, I have ideas that I'm not ready to share on how we're going to make it happen. It is a requirement in today's world that everyone have internet access. And someone else I'm going to have in my office that I don't think is a position now, I'm going to have a technology advisor. I'm going to have a $1 a year person who's like an amazing technologist that the city could never afford to pay a real salary to, who's going to come in 1 year at a time and help us with how we're going to use technology in the best way possible, not just for the city and how we deliver services, but for our residents.
A part of what makes San Diego the finest city in America is not just corporations, but also nonprofit organizations. Mm-hmm. And if you were seated in front of all the nonprofit executive directors, including the arts, because certainly we're known for that. We've sent more theater to Broadway than any other city in America. What would you say to our nonprofit sector, particularly this time where they're trying to survive, they're trying to redefine themselves? What message do you have?
They are suffering. They are struggling. I'm a seasoned subscriber to the Old Globe, the La Jolla Playhouse, and the San Diego Rep. As you know, they've all canceled their seasons. They've had essentially to lay off most of their staffs. The arts are a key part of what makes San Diego so special. And I've had major employers tell me that actually our vibrant arts scene, plus our beautiful natural environment, is much more important in attracting and retaining talent than having a professional football team. So so these organizations do get access to the federal stimulus. I'm hoping that it will help them survive. They are a key part of what make our city special. And I mean, I know in my personal life, Neil and I particularly love theater, and I'm looking forward to being able to go again.
Speaking of that, can you speak to Balboa Park? How would you envision Balboa Park, which is really, to me, a treasure in San Diego? What do we do with that piece of geography 10, 15 years from now? What would be your vision for it?
Well, first of all, to preserve it and enhance it and not commercialize it. And I've never supported the paid parking garage in Balboa Park, especially as we see the world changing. A parking garage that we would actually be on the hook for some of the cost, I think would be an albatross around our necks. And I think we need to have a clear governance structure in Balboa Park. And then we can look at ways to increase revenues to fund the ongoing maintenance of the park. And that's a priority because it's a regional park. We all use Balboa Park. I mean, actually, people all over San Diego County and all over the world use Balboa Park. It's a major tourist attraction.
It's one of those things when you fly into San Diego, you look at it, and it's nothing like that in any other city. It's just quite an amazing, beautiful landmark in San Diego. Barbara, if there's a misperception about you, what is it, and how do you address it?
Well, I had a tough primary battle, as you all know.
Congratulations, you made it.
Just stunned the political establishment at the end by, getting to the final two. I think people sometimes underestimate me. I'm a tough lady. I care deeply about San Diego. I believe my entrepreneurial background sets me apart from my competition. That background combined with what will be 4 years at City Hall. So I'm learning, what works, what doesn't work at City Hall, has really equipped me to be the next mayor. And I'm blessed. This is not a stepping stone for me. I don't care if I have another elected job. I don't care if I have 2 terms. The next mayor may have to make some tough decisions. And this is my legacy to this community, to my children and my 3 grandchildren. And I'm hoping to have more grandchildren who live here. I have 3 so far.
Priorities.
Yeah.
I was going to bring it back to COVID for a little bit and talk about something that's been on my mind. And as I had to lay off 20 plus of my own employees and walk them through the process of unemployment, the other really sensitive issue was rent. And we spoke a lot. And first I had to change their mindset to let them know this isn't 2 weeks, this isn't a month. I put July as a possibility in their mind for reopening. But we also talked about rent and speaking to landlords to ask for grace periods. Could you speak a little bit about moratoriums and your thoughts on
the city? Yeah, so the city council did pass an eviction moratorium that applies to both people who live in apartments. It also applies to businesses in terms of giving, if you can demonstrate that you are directly impacted by COVID-19, you eventually have to pay the rent, but you can defer the rent. And this moratorium exists through May 31st.
Okay.
And then the city council can examine if we need to extend it. As the day we passed it was near the end of March. And at that point, we were unclear about any federal assistance. The extra unemployment money hadn't yet kicked in. It's actually just starting to kick in. I saw an email from the state of California that actually many of the unemployment claims aren't even going to be processed till the last week in April. So people haven't gotten their money yet. I think most landlords that I've talked to want to work out payment plans with their tenants. Nobody wants to put someone out on the street. Nobody wants to have an apartment to rent. I think commercial landlords feel the same way in terms of the stores that are renting from them. And it's a very complicated ecosystem. I've seen proposals to just say to people, you don't have to pay your rent for April and May. Well, then how is the landlord going to pay their property taxes, their mortgage, their utilities, the landscaping? So we're in a world where we all have to figure out how we're going to work together. And I think the federal assistance is going to be really key in allowing this to happen.
So you think that'll bridge the gap and there will be a moratorium on people having to pay mortgages?
Well, actually, some lenders have given a moratorium on mortgages that you can add it on to the end of your mortgage. Mm-hmm. So I think every bank is doing something different. And also there are 2 federal organizations nicknamed Freddie and Fannie that back mortgages mostly for large apartments. And they have said that they will also add it on at the end.
Wow.
Yeah. So
you've made an issue of gig employees, and that goes all the way to like musicians, but also people working for Uber. What's your position on that now? It isn't that easy yet. I mean, the state unemployment is pretty murky on how to do it. It really isn't that easy, no matter what they say on the media.
So one of the things that has troubled me was that when people were going in to apply for, first of all, the federal stimulus clearly said that independent contractors should be covered.
It said that, yeah.
It said that. But when people were going to apply for California unemployment and they were an independent contractor, they essentially were told you have to say that you were misclassified in order to get the insurance. That is wrong. And the governor, to his credit, I think it was either late yesterday or early today, said that independent contractors will get unemployment insurance. And I want to thank Governor Newsom for standing up and doing that.
Will they get that extra $600 even if they unfortunately can't apply until later with this confusion?
You know what? I don't have the answer to that.
Okay.
I'm assuming they should be able to get what everybody got, but I don't know.
I did it myself, and it said, be honest, say this, say that. And then as soon as you're honest, you were slapped down. So
Yes.
I think there were probably a million other people that got the same rebuff.
Yes.
Thank you for that. And you've been a backer of that statewide.
I've been a backer of, we're in a complicated world, and the employment code was written for a world of 100 years ago.
Right.
And we need to figure out a new category of worker that will get protections, but is not an employee and, is not what we have thought of traditionally as an independent contractor, like a plumber who comes to your house, fixes your sink and then leaves. Clearly an independent contractor.
Yeah, because otherwise in a time like this, people don't have the money, they think, to go get medical care or any number of other things. I mean, do you think this will lead us, all of this COVID, in a big way to a more just society, or is that just dreaming like John Lennon here?
I'm hopeful that it makes us care more about each other. And I've seen so many random acts of kindness in terms of neighbors, getting food for people who are self-quarantined, or just reaching out. You talked about the police officers, playing music and thanking people for obeying social distancing. I think I'm seeing that all over the city, and that's part of what makes San Diego so special.
Awesome.
Barbara, the next disaster that may face us may not be a virus. It may be San Onofre. San Onofre presents 3.6 million pounds of nuclear waste. Mm-hmm. And that could be catastrophic, not just for us, but for our neighbors up north as well. What's being done about that in some very serious way to be preventative and proactive?
I am not an expert on that. I think a great guest for you would be Congressman Mike Levin, whose congressional district includes San Onofre. And he has been all over this issue.
Is there anything that can happen through the mayor's office level? Can the conversation begin with you?
I think just supporting federal efforts. I know one of the issues now is, they're storing the waste essentially right next to the ocean and getting the waste moved. So that the mayor has a legislative affairs office. So, we're dependent on money from Sacramento. We're dependent on money and policies from Washington, D.C., and it is one of our legislative priorities to have San Onofre be a safer situation for all of us. And in that case, it's working through our congressional delegation.
Sure, because the consequences for us could be dire.
We could all just die instantly. So
that's right. Yeah. What distinguishes you from Todd? What if we had to do a compare?
Okay, well, I think this should be the last question. So I think it's truly the diversity of my life experiences. I've been early in my career, I was a journalist. I covered government for the Sacramento Bee and the LA Times. As I told you earlier, from that, I learned to do my research, to ask questions, to listen, to be relentless in getting the story. Very good qualities in a mayor. I've been a high-tech entrepreneur where I've had to deal with the unknown and pivot as situations and the environment change. I've also started two organizations that empower women, Run Women Run and Athena San Diego. Both are good examples of public-private partnerships. And I worked at Connect in the early days. For the first 10 years, I was the associate director of Connect. I actually started the Springboard program and the Most Innovative New Products Awards. These are 3 examples of public-private partnerships, which I think is the way forward for our city, for every city. Government can't do everything. How are you going to work with industry, with nonprofits to get things done? So I think my background is really unique in bringing a really new perspective to being the mayor of our city. And I think that makes me very different from someone who has spent their entire career as either working for a government official or as a government official.
And my last question to you, for those people who are looking, and I see Amanda smiling, for those people who are looking that support you, that think you'd be the best mayor San Diego has ever had in its history, what can they do to support you? What's your calling to them?
Our website is barbarabry.com. Would love to have you sign up to volunteer for our campaign. We are creating a virtual campaign. We're going to be doing a lot of exciting things in a socially distanced way. And would like to invite people to be a part of a campaign that's going to be run in a very different way because we have to, but I've had to do this all my life, adapt to a new situation, and then to elect a mayor who will also do things in a very different way.
Awesome. What do you think, Amanda? Boss?
Well, I think, my arms. I think we had one question. It was twofold. Quickly, what have been some of the biggest challenges in District 1 during COVID? And what have been some success stories in District 1 that I thought if we'd leave on a high note about some of the awesomeness that's going on up and down our coast.
So some of the challenges were the homeless in La Jolla and how to make sure they would have access to bathrooms and to hand washing stations. We've solved the problem, but they locked up the parks. That was what, if they hadn't locked up the parks, would have been easier. But actually in Kellogg Park, down in La Jolla Shores, the bathrooms are open. And homeless individuals can go there. What we've done at the Cove, they were all locked up because the construction at the Cove had stopped, but they moved some outside the locked area. So that's been that was something, because I think about how are we going to help everybody? And we did figure out how to do it. So that was a success. That was a challenge that we figured out. And then I think the biotech industry is what I'm most proud of because that's a big part of my district. And the La Jolla Institute of Immunology with Dr. Erica Ullman-Sapphire is in my council district, and she is literally leading a worldwide effort to figure out how to treat the coronavirus.
One of the things journalists usually ask the questions, and today you have the questions.
I like asking them better. Next time, I'm asking them.
I want to thank you for always showing up and always answering questions, and even the tough ones. You come in, and I think what you told us is that I'm a tough cookie. People underestimate me, but really underneath all that, I'm one tough cookie. And so thank you for spending time with us today.
And I'm also, I'm a grandma and a mom, and I'm compassionate. There's a lot of sides to Barbara Bry.
Absolutely.
No doubt.
Well, we're going to get you back on one day because I do want to talk about that whole theme, being a woman in a table full of men. But that's a whole nother.
That's a whole other subject. Well, I'm looking forward to being able to come to your restaurant again, and I'm hopeful and optimistic you'll be open before July.
I hope so too.
Barbara, great to see you again.
Great to see you. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys. I love you all so much. Thank you, San Diego, for tuning in and being patient. All right. Ciao.
Thank you, London. Thank you,
Bye.
Oh, my arms.